internets! Hello, you lovelies, and welcome to KoiCast, a podcast about pop culture, about comic books, about movies, and about some people who we love very, very much. I'm Koi Jandro, joined as ever by the great, the wonderful, the ever not as cynical as one might expect, though curmudgeonly on the outside, soft and fluffy on the inside, Jake Lloyd Bacon.
I am a goddamn teddy bear. I don't know what the fuck this bullshit is that you're spouting.
I think the bristles on the fur would say otherwise.
No.
I'd say, the bearish nature goes in a confusing direction.
No, that's just the New York.
And that's what I'm just acknowledging. Like, people might hear this brusqueness.
That's just the New York, but we're nice people.
Some of those one-star reviews have otherwise to say, and I'm here to defend your bearish honor.
We'll give you directions,
and then we'll judge you for asking for them.
Get out of my fucking way. But also,
you know where you stand.
Hi, Koi.
How you doing? How's the week?
Sleepy. It's a sleepy week. I'm sleepy. I don't know if you can tell. My eyes are puffy right now. I'm very puffy faced. I'm very puffy. I'm very sleepy. I had a couple early mornings, and I'm not used to having early mornings because I have not been getting up early, and they have taken a toll on me because I do not go to bed at a reasonable hour.
Yep.
And,
I understand. Similar boat, not as specific. You have regimented reason. Mine is just insomnia.
And also, bookstore has also just decided that he likes going out in the middle of the night now for some reason.
Oh, that's fun.
So we'll be asleep at fucking 3 o'clock in the morning. All of a sudden, bookstore's just whining at the fucking door and will not cease. Like, it's going to take, if we were to ignore the behavior to the point where he just has to settle, like, it'll take him longer to break than we. You know what I mean? Like, we will.
That's hell. When you know that in your bones, you've already lost.
100%. But other than that, we're in it and we're living it and we're doing it. We're doing it together.
Well, we are going to have a special episode today because not only is it San Diego Comic-Con next week, which we usually talk about this episode, the week leading up to San Diego. We usually share our Comic-Con thoughts, but that is a yearly occurrence. What is a once-in-a-lifetime occurrence is Deadpool and Wolverine also drops during San Diego Comic-Con, so we thought we would take a journey through the movies that led to this film. Now, we're not going to go through the entirety of the MCU, but we are going to briefly jaunt through the Fox universe.
We're talking Foxicles because, listen, we saw the trailer. We see that what's present.
We saw the new spot with Tyler Mane, some of us.
Yeah, I didn't see it.
It's pretty great. It's only a minute, and I'm really proud of them because the restraint they've shown, and we should actually start there. I'm very proud of the marketing of Deadpool Wolverine. As of press, as of it being the 15th of July, they never had a third trailer come out because what they did was they had 2 trailers, and then they put out the ticket sales without a trailer.
Right.
In my experience, it's one trailer announces the movie exists and gets you excited for tone. Second trailer shows you a little bit of story. Third trailer ruins the whole fucking experience. I'm very proud of them not doing the here's the whole goddamn movie trailer. And the only thing they've put out since the second trailer, as of press, is this 1-minute spot that was 20 seconds of old footage, 40 seconds of revealing Sabretooth. And what was genius about that was they actually showed frames we had seen before, but they had someone in a cloak where Sabretooth was standing in the other footage, meaning we might have already seen lots of cameos in scenes that we're about to experience anew in the movie. It's like doing the Hulk thing, but more subtle, because we've seen the frames, and oh wait, in that frame was someone iconic.
Sure.
And I love that because it gives stand-ins an actual fucking job. Like, they're actually in frames. Like, stand-ins jobs are wicked hard. They're actually in frames now, which is exciting. It gives you hope that there are elements that you might not have seen, and it makes you want to go rewatch the trailers. Like, it's genius marketing. So I'm so glad that's all they've done. I do worry once the movie's out, TV spots are going to immediately ruin it, so I would recommend you see it Thursday.
That's my assumption, too, which sucks because we're going to be in the middle of nowhere when this comes out, so we don't know quite what our plans are. But
this is worth an hour drive, sir. You just did an entire rewatch.
I have a theory, by the way.
Do
you want to hear my theory? If this happens, you can't be like, oh, you spoiled it for me because I don't know anything. All right, I have no. Okay. This is not. I have a theory because of the footage that we have seen, I have a theory that the yellow suit is a misdirect.
As in that Wolverine isn't the main, like in what way?
As in we're gonna see him in the brown and gold.
Oh, like
I have
that's
a
his
feeling.
temporary suit?
I have a feeling that they showed us that so that everybody's like, wow, look, crazy. This is the suit. And then, because it seems like we've really only seen it in like one setting in all of the previews and images.
I'd say we've seen it in the city setting and then in the end of time desolation. So I'd say 2, but still,
See,
that's
I feel like those are the same. I thought they were the same thing in my brain. I assume that's one moment in the movie.
It could be.
But I don't know. I just had this. I don't know. I can't remember what I was watching. I was watching something the other day about. I think it might have been that the Marvel vs. DC series, on Roku. I think it is. I don't know what it is. Anyways, and it was all about like the evolution of suits, and I was just thinking about like God, like the yellow is really like intrinsically tied to the 90s, but it really isn't what. Like Wolverine, when I think of Wolverine, I actually think of the brown.
I think the comics think of the brown and yellow. I think all other pop culture is the blue and yellow. So like it'd be interesting if it's a commentary, like if it's the 90s X-Men, because a lot of people thought X-Men 97 might tie into it.
Right,
is it a comic book take? Is it Days of Future Past? Like, I think that's what's most exciting to me is we know we have Patch. But that's all we know. And I was so worried we'd have at least one of the other cameos of another Wolverine actor spoiled, because I assume we're going to get other actors as Wolverine. The fact that they've held the cards this close to the chest, I'm so
and I just trust this team a little bit more than other teams to really like save some of the fun things that aren't just, because there is a part of the yellow suit that's like, all right, we saw it. Now what? Like it almost
the fact
feels
that they haven't showed the cowl, dude. Like we haven't seen his mascot.
Right.
That's
a good point.
Trusting the audience. Like, because I don't want to see that until I see it in theater. Because I remember at CinemaCon, that was the first time I'd seen the two of them side by side, and it was that no phones PSA. And the feelings in my body, seeing the two of them side by side, I was like, oh my God, there was no way to save this for the movie, but can you imagine? And then I was like, wait, the cowl though, like they have given me a gift of saving me.
Haven't even thought about it. Yeah.
So anyways. I also think they've done a really good job by having the Tyler Mane ad come out and being like, wait, we've seen that so many times and it wasn't even like that itself is good marketing because it makes you re-look at everything you have seen. Like it's not like he's got every award the last 10 years for his marketing. Like Ryan Reynolds is what an entrepreneur and an actor and a Deadpool advocate to make this movie. And Kevin Feige coming out and being like, do whatever you want. We trust you. You're Ryan Reynolds.
Right.
We're in a good spot. And Sean Levy is also not to be separated here. Like I honestly think without Real Steel and even the Adam Project, I wouldn't be as faithful to this.
And that's why I said this team. I trust this team.
Yeah,
I know that we all like to Ryan Reynolds is like the captain of the ship, so we like to think like everything good comes from the great Reynolds on high. But
and that new guy, Hugh Jackman, I think he's going to do big things.
Yeah, he's got a bright future. Well, so anyways,
Hugh Jackman,
we definitely seems, at least, again, this is all conjecture, but this seems like the end of the Fox universe, right? So
it would seem. I do think Hugh might be in Secret Wars, but I think Fox-wise, it would be the perfect door to close, and they're at an age where they should close it in a way that is honoring it.
So while I have not revisited all of them, I very recently revisited the vast majority of the better of the Fox universe. I thought, let's take a stroll through memory lane, right?
So how did you choose better with it being 20 years removed?
Well, honestly, I just sort of skipped. I really only skipped, I think, the one movie and then just stopped once I went, all right, I don't need to see the rest of it.
Okay. You chose by omission. I see.
But so let's talk about the original fucking X-Men. You were in middle school for this? How old were you? 2000.
Well, I came out in the year 2000. Yeah. I was age 12. I believe I was in 7th grade.
Gotcha. Great. What is that? That's middle school, right?
Junior 7, high.
8, 6, 8, 7. Yeah. 6, 7, and 8 is middle school. 9, 10.
For 11, me, 7 and 8 was junior high because 9th is high school.
So, I'm sorry. Junior high. I'm sorry. You're right. That's yeah.
So I was a freshly junior high boy.
Sure. I was a senior in high school. X-Men is in my yearbook.
I adore that
because at the end of the yearbook, whatever the company is that makes yearbooks, right?
Yes.
They have a thing in the back of it, which is like 5 or 6 pages of full color, like what was happening this year in the world. Yeah. And it's got like some politics and some pop culture and music. I'm pretty sure there's like NSYNC is in there. Like, I don't know, there's some, or like JT, like there's like music stuff that's happening. But then there's like the cast of the X-Men in their gear in the black leather, like that's like a half a page of it. And I just remember thinking that was really funny. When I remember the space that, like, the headspace I was in was just like, oh my God, I can't believe we're getting an X-Men movie. Did you see the trailer? Did you see the way Wolverine was swinging around on the Statue of Liberty? And like, as a New Yorker, we were like, yeah, fuck yeah, they're in. Like, it was just like, I remember I was so stoked for this movie when it came out.
I remember thinking, and I think I've told this story briefly, but not in this context, but I've told you guys the parody story with the Wizard magazine, Leonardo DiCaprio, James Cameron poster, how it was a Spider-Man poster. It was painted. It was Leonardo DiCaprio playing Spider-Man,
right,
as directed by James Cameron. And I didn't know what the word parody meant. So I just thought a Spider-Man movie was coming out for a full year. So I remember when the movie didn't come out, thinking, like, I was probably 6. So this is going to sound dumb, but to a 6-year-old, this makes total sense. When something I thought was coming out for a year didn't come out, I thought it was somehow not possible. Like, as soon as it wasn't real, I was like, can't make comic books into movies. Guess there's a law. And so my brain went, well, because of that damn law, I guess we'll never see it. And then when X-Men came out, I literally remember thinking, like, and now this is 6 years later, whatever, I'm 12. Oh, they can do that. Right. Of course, you dumb child. They, of course, can make. But it felt so impossible because Blade, I remember, came out in 98 and I was 10. And I remember I knew Blade, the comic character, but Blade, even today, only has 60 comics to his name. Like, today, 2024, solo, there's only 60 Blade comics. So I remember when Blade came out, they barely advertised anything Marvel. They just had like Marvel Entertainment with a different logo. Like, it was not a comic book movie.
Right.
So it kind of in a weird way was what my 6-year-old self thought, where I was like, oh, they snuck it in. They made this movie secretly a comic movie. Right. Like, it still felt like it wasn't allowed. And I didn't grow up in the Roger Corman movies. I didn't grow up on Reeves Superman. I didn't see Reeves Superman until I was 30.
So 2 years ago.
Like, I just saw it. So X-Men, to me, obviously Blade came first, but Blade felt like a secret comic movie. X-Men was the most holy shit. Well, there are at least 12 people that know the X-Men besides me.
And it's also that, like, X-Men, like, Blade, people were like, oh, that was based on comic, you know. Do you know what I mean? Like,
it wasn't.
Whereas X-Men, it's X-Men. Like, oh, I've seen that cartoon. Because even if you didn't know it was a comic book, it's like, oh, they made a movie out of the cartoon that's very popular, even if that was...
It was such a shift in culture.
Right, 100%.
And it felt so personal. It felt like there was a moment of, like, we've won. Like, and then Spider-Man doubled down on that. But there was such a we won moment this year in 2000. Right. And it's funny how this age gap between you and I, we were at such perfect ages at different demos.
Sure.
I was perfectly 12 and so young, and you were perfectly, like, in New York in high school.
But it was also just, like, you know, the cool factor of the 2000s. So cool. Like I can remember being upset in the previews that they didn't look like the X-Men. I remember having this conversation with my buddy Vinny. Shout out to Vinny Ricciardi. He's a fantastic singer. I don't know where you are in the world, but your name just came to me in a fleeting memory. Okay. We were in, like, musical together or something like that. And we were just, like, both the nerds that were talking about X-Men all the time. So anyways,
respect.
I remember having a conversation about how I was like, oh, it sucks that they don't look like the X-Men. Yet then when I went to the movie and they made the joke about, like, oh, what do you want? Yellow spandex? I remember being like, yeah, what do you want? Yellow spandex? It's so cool. They're in black leather. Like, so I was the perfect age to be sold that this is cool. This is fucking, they're like, they all look like cool bikers. Like, you know, with that said, there were things I adamantly disliked from the jump of this movie. Right. And I feel like it was, you know, we are spoiled now, as you just said, like, the tides shift. But back then it was just like, this has to be good because it's the only thing we got. It's the only food on the table, so you might as well fucking eat.
For a year or years, plural.
Yeah.
In this case, it was only 1 year till Spider-Man,
Right.
but we didn't know Spider-Man would be good because
Right.
it was the first. So it felt like this had to be perfect.
And so I think like at the time I was just like, yeah, it's good. It's great. It's a fucking X-Men movie. Yeah. I like the character when he does the thing with the thing, I remember always hating Cyclops in it. Not like, oh, I don't like Cyclops' character, but like not liking the way Cyclops was in it, because as much as I liked James Marsden, I always thought I felt at 18, I wouldn't say this now, of course, because at 18 you think that you're going to turn into a specific type of person, but I thought he was like me. Do you know what I mean? Like he's kind of like wiry, and he's got like very sharp, pointy features, and he's kind of like a schmarmy, like, I don't know. He's like a whine. He's just like a kind of little bitch, And I felt like, I didn't know the archetype at the time, but like I always imagined Cyclops as like kind of this like Captain America. They're very similar in my head, and they always were. So I remember never liking Cyclops, and that never changed. It only got worse. I remember not liking Storm, and I remember not liking pretty much any of the villains except for Magneto. I remember like that's my recalling. It was like I just thought like Sabretooth was so dorky looking, and I just like. But it was at the time you're just like, yeah, it's fucking X-Men.
Yeah, I remember I was 12, so I remember loving Toad. 'Cause
Sure.
he looked cool.
Well, it's Darth Maul. Do you know that Darth Maul? He did the Darth Maul thing with the staff.
That was also like, you
Right.
had that nerd cred of like
Totally.
crossover.
Totally.
And I remember thinking like, that's not Rogue, like a lot. I remember as a kid, ooh,
Yeah.
I love Rogue, and I remember thinking like, why isn't Storm in it more?
Why isn't she talk like the way she's supposed to talk?
Yeah, like to me, Storm was the biggest and I think that's one of the reasons I love Storm now, is because that was such a formative age to be defensive of a character and
Sure.
realize you were
Especially
defensive.
at that age. Yeah.
Like I was so young, and I
didn't-
knew then it was wrong. So
I
then
didn't
it became
dislike
like
anything at that age. Like when
I remember. Well, I learned to read with these guys,
Yeah,
so
of course,
like
yeah.
it was so important to me. So when they weren't like, I remember it made me love Hugh Jackman that much more because he was right. Like I didn't care about height then. I
No,
was
of
just like,
course.
this is Wolverine.
And you know what? So in recent rewatch, I just watched this in late May. I rewatched because I knew we were going to be doing this. So I was like, oh, let's watch it, right? It is this kind of insane cusp movie where there are scenes really specifically between Wolverine and Xavier. So it's no surprise to me that the long-lasting thing ended up being like Logan, for example, that are so incredibly like pitch perfect and unique, and like they just have that fucking magic about like the conversations that occur in this universe, right? And then simultaneously being so corny that it really borderlines like it. I watched my most recent rewatch. The thing that was the lasting impression was, man, this is a kid's movie. Like, and I don't have that recollection of it from being 18, but
That's interesting.
it's so much of this movie is really a kid's movie. The bad one-liners, some of the action is just atrocious. And then in recent rewatch, my rating of it went down because it was just one of those things where like you just pay attention to different things the more you see stuff, because the shininess of the like,
yeah.
hey, look at that thing, it goes away because you're used to it, right?
I think X2 got better for me, and X-Men 1
Oh.
I thought was like,
Yeah.
yeah.
But one of my other big takeaways from rewatching X1 was just like the whole ending doesn't make any sense. It's like they set up these specific things of why it has to go a certain way, and then they don't make good on any of that. Like first off, how does giving Rogue Magneto's powers make her do the thing that Magneto was doing? It's not like he has
It's not
mind
like
control over her.
It's not like mind control. She
Right.
would have control over her emotions through his goals.
Sure, she would just have his powers. It's not like she all of a sudden has to do his bidding.
She's
right?
all of a sudden not him.
Right. Also, the whole reason for everybody being present is because once he does give her his powers, he's going to be on the brink of death. Yet he has absolutely no problem with Wolverine, with all of the things when he tells us, oh man, I'm gonna like that.
Yeah, the whole movie sets up him being weak,
right?
And then he's not.
The whole thing, and then I'm just like, oh, the ending doesn't make any sense, and I don't think I ever really like paid that even any thought. It was just like such a like, yeah, this is what happens in the movie that I've seen 100 times, you know.
I also think there is a kind of in the inverse of it has to be good because we might not get another one.
Right.
I think there was also the idea of it's a comic book movie. Let's just get it done with these rules we've made. One of the good ones that came out of it was, and I didn't realize until maybe 2 years ago, the can't read my mind because the helmet was invented on set. In the comics, it wasn't until after the movie that Magneto's helmet was to serve the purpose of blocking Xavier's powers.
Right.
That wasn't canon for 40 years. That's insane. For 40 years, Magneto just wore a helmet.
I don't feel like that was something I was aware of. I feel like that was something that in my mind I might be retrofitted.
Yeah, we all retroactively.
That's not the story
the comic made that.
That's not the story in
until
the cartoon.
2004.
Not in the cartoon.
Nothing. They literally wrote that on set.
That's like some Berenstain Bears shit right
Isn't
there.
that some mind-boggling? Like I assumed my whole life.
I feel like that's not. I feel like you're lying to me right now.
On set, David Hayter talked about how they realized they could make his helmet block Xavier, and then they just did it, and now it's the most obvious thing.
But wasn't that always the thing with him and Juggernaut as well? Wasn't the whole thing
Juggernaut was, but it wasn't Magneto's helmet. It was Juggernaut's whole ass
right.
But they never had Magneto's helmet serving an actual purpose.
That's incredible. All right, so
isn't that so? Like that is the opposite of what you're describing, where it's like that enhances the whole lore.
So X1 is a launching pad, right? It gave us some good. What's the best things that X1 gave us?
Hugh Jackman. An undiscovered singer that took over for a guy who broke his hand in Mission Impossible.
100%.
Crazy.
Hugh Jackman at the top of the list, and then pitch perfect casting for Ian. And
it gave us Xavier and Eric. It gave us Magneto and Charles.
Also, establishing that opening scene. I think it's supposed to be Poland that they're in. That establishing that opening scene as like, here you go. Do you want to understand the motives of your villain? Like that, I think establishes a baseline for your villain for as many movies as you want to make and as much flip-flopping as you would like to have. Like they really
because you cared that much about him.
That is if that movie didn't start that way and they didn't really lean into that for his character, you would have not been able to do another few movies and backstory movies and all of that shit. Like I think that's the best of it.
I totally agree. I think it gives us an opportunity to like explore villains as not comic book villains. Like it actually subverses the slang about comic book villains. And I think it's really smart for a movie to be like, hey, we're another medium. Let's make them human. I think just from a storytelling, like Jungian standpoint, it's a genius move. Yeah. I also, one of the things I want to give the first one credit for is setting. I think it does a really good job establishing like a tone of a world that has X-Men.
Yeah.
It does a really good job, not only with like the X-Mansion, but also a world that hates and fears them, feeling like you can live in that world. I think Iceman is incredibly well served in the X-Men films. Iceman is a favorite of mine as well from the movies.
And not so poorly written considering how bad we were at writing teenagers in 2000 in mainstream media.
I haven't met a lot of the original X-Men in all my work, and then it's one of the reasons I'm really bummed. Like Disney had no communication with me whatsoever for Deadpool. Like I have dedicated my life to Deadpool and the X-Men, and they changed PR teams literally 3 months before Deadpool, so I've had no access whatsoever, and it's been like one of the most stressful things that I've worked 10 years to get to this point, and I have no access to the old guard. Like with Spider-Man No Way Home, I only had Tom Holland, and then at the premiere, it was amazing meeting Willem Dafoe. It was amazing, suddenly my childhood. I was really hoping with X-Men, since it's a movie about that, I was going to get the experience of like meeting Hugh Jackman, who was inspiring to me to like these movies could exist because of Hugh Jackman. And I remember, and I'm not going to get access to, which is very Disney. I got thoughts, but the moment I met Shawn Ashmore, ironically on the set of The Boys, it was so funny because he's playing in a universe that is satirizing the thing that his universe birthed.
Sure, of course.
So it was so cool to meet him and have that oh my God, you're such a big part of my childhood. But it was almost like the meeting itself was ironic because we're on the set.
Right.
That's all this built up like
It's like
satirization of the thing.
It's like Keaton and Birdman.
100%.
Right.
Yeah, it'd be like meeting Keaton on the set of something that's.
Right.
So I was so hoping X-Men would be like the opportunity to non-ironically talk about Wolverine. So Disney, thanks.
Right. So X2, ultimate glow
What
up.
a picture. What a picture.
It's such a glow up. It's so much more slick than the first movie. The dialogue is so much sharper and less corny and less child driven. The actual filmmaking itself is like if you watch both of those movies back to back, sans a few moments of the first, it does not seem like they're the same team at all. Like they seem like two completely, and I don't know if it's just like aging and like or trial and error, but like they seem like they have nothing to do with each other as far as the quality of filmmaking. All of the story, all of the relationships are better, even though some of them are still like they still do all the same characters dirty. Do you know what I mean? Like they don't.
Oh yeah. Storm is still irrelevant. Cyclops is in it even less.
Yeah.
You mean the leaders of the X-Men?
Yeah, but even like the relationship, like that we're supposed to be told is this big driving thing for Logan between him and Jean, like it doesn't really exist. He's just kind of lusts over her, and they don't actually.
Yeah, it's
never watch them.
Important.
Yeah, we never watch them have a moment that's more than just like, oh boy, they really want to do each other. Do you know what I mean?
I never think of Famke and Hugh as having chemistry. I think of them as being attractive people that want to bone. Like
I argue that they do have
in a very plus.
chemistry, and they didn't show it on screen. Like I think they have like an actual what we call chemistry, like the science of it. But the lines they said did not aid in that in any capacity.
See, I feel like Halle Berry and Hugh Jackman had such amazing chemistry that it actually informed the comics a bit. Because like there was always a Wolverine Storm like they have. But after the movie, I think there's like, oh, okay. Well, like to me, it felt like life affected that chemistry.
Sure.
I was like, that's where it is.
But
like Halle Berry, who can blame, that happening on set. Like if you just feel something, man.
Yeah.
Goddamn.
But I don't know.
But X2 is near perfect. The Berserker Rage for a PG-13 film, the opening at the White House,
Alan Cumming.
And that being,
Alan Cumming is. People always talk about Hugh Jackman, and they always talk about Ian McKellen, and they always talk about Patrick Stewart. This is one of the all-time great comic book adaptation castings. He is perfect for Nightcrawler on so many levels. He has that sweetness and that care, but simultaneously cocky and smarmy. Like, by the way, can we talk about how two of my all-time favorite X-Men are both cast from musical theater fucking nerds? but the reality is
Alan Cumming doing the work.
But that's part of it. Like, there's a reality. Like, there's something to the fact that Alan Cummings kind of is a circus performer.
Yeah.
Like, man, I just fucking love it so much. And the story they tell with him is so good. And he looks incredible in this. The only times that they show close-ups of his nails, and you go like, yeah, looks like bad. Not bad, but I mean, incredible for the era. But like by today's standards, it doesn't look real. They don't look. His fingers don't look like they have senses. They don't look like they,
Right. They are clearly. But otherwise, like I miss Practical so much watching these movies.
The decision to just underlight him in every scene.
And that helps Nightcrawler in general.
Oh, it's
like,
so
that's how
fucking
Nightcrawler's
good.
drawn.
Right. Yeah. 100%. Like, it's so fucking good. It's just, X2 is just so much slicker. To me, in my opinion, thus far, X2 is the best X-Men movie, in my opinion. Like, as far as
it's my third favorite, but where you and I strongly disagree on my number one, so I can see it being like my number two, because I do think it's right on par with Days of Future Past, and that's only because Days of Future Past makes some insane, weird character choices, but I think the movie itself is such a fucking banger of a storytelling. Like, the Days of Future Past is insane that it happened when it did.
Yeah.
Like, how that movie came together, like, but I personally think First Class is like, but we just fundamentally, I think, see First Class differently. I think that's one of those instances where it's like, well, that's different.
Days of Future Past is just below X2, in my opinion, as far as like the things I like about, like, they're pretty I think the thing about Days of Future Past is that like it's still a zany time travel movie, and don't get me wrong, I know it's always been part of the X-Men, a huge part of it, but it's just like it's still at the end of the day, and it's also an adaptation of a great comic where they changed things that
didn't need to be changed.
That it felt to me like they were reverse engineering for nothing. Whereas there are other comic book adaptations where they change stuff, and I go,
makes it better.
I don't get, or it makes maybe not the story better, but it makes us watching the movie better. I will argue in defense. Everybody, are you listening? Are you sitting down?
Well,
I will argue in defense of Zack Snyder changing the ending of The Watchmen indefinitely, because it made watching that movie significantly better. And
you heard it here, folks.
Now,
Jake Lloyd Snyder.
Don't get me wrong. They still shouldn't have killed the people in the alley, because otherwise Rorschach's whole existence is pointless. But you can't. Snyder
it's still his best movie.
You can't help but Snyder, can he? But I agree. But like, I don't dislike some changes, but I feel like Days of Future Past, I don't know. But we'll get there. So wait, really quick. X2, in my opinion, still the best X-Men movie. Everything they got right. The entering politics better. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, don't get me wrong, they did it in X1, but it felt like it was a side quest.
It was more heavy-handed
Yeah.
in X1. It felt like it was added on because it needed to be, whereas
Right.
this felt like it was part of the story.
X1, it felt like we needed victims. It felt like we needed victims.
Right.
Oh, politicians, that makes it easy. Yeah.
Which is also very much the early 2000s mindset that it came out of,
Right.
Which is the late 90s mindset of making it. That said, I do want to give credit to X2. I would say X2, Days of Future Past, and for me, First Class are all between like 8.5 to 8.8. Like they're all, for me, very close to each other as absolute bangers that I could interchange depending on my mood. But those are the X-Men movies that are team. I still put Logan and Deadpool in a different category altogether. And like those are in the 9s, whereas like these three for me are in that high 8s, which is still better than the average MCU film. I want to give full credit to this origin of this universe. These early X-Men are amazing.
And again, like I always have to put the caveat of like, for the time, because I don't think X-Men is amazing. I'd say it's good. It's amazing for the time.
X2, Days of Future Past,
right.
and First Class are amazing. Period.
Oh yeah.
I would say X-Men, X2 are amazing for the time.
Sure. But yeah, X2 gave us, it gave us a slightly better world building. It gave us better relationships with everybody. It gave us a little bit of a character for Storm and her connection, Kurt, but also it felt like it still felt accessory to Kurt's story and to other stories instead of like actually doing anything to move the needle in any capacity.
They've literally written scripts for Storm that were just to bait Halle Berry coming back in that they never planned on filming.
Wow.
Ugh, like Matthew Vaughn left. I don't know if this, I'm sure it's somewhat public, but
sure.
Matthew Vaughn was going to do a trilogy that was going to be X-Men First Class, a second film about the Cure, and then X-Men Days of Future Past being the third in a trilogy. That was the arc that was supposed to go.
Right.
They wanted Halle Berry back for his second film, and he left because they had written 30 pages of fake scripts to lure Halle Berry back in, and he found out they were never going to film it, and he quit the entire franchise.
Oh.
The reason Matthew Vaughn left is because of the disrespect to the actress Halle Berry, the character Storm, and the entire idea of that politics. Like, that's insane.
It's also just like, it shows you how gross
all of it is.
But it also just shows you like how gross the industry was about fucking women of color of the era, because the reality was, it was like, well, if it's not Halle Berry, what's the point? Because
and
it was
even
like,
when it is Halle Berry.
Do you know what I mean? Like, yeah, I know, but you get what I'm saying? Like, to get her, like,
yeah,
man, oh God, what a world. Anyways, X3, baby, a movie that has 2 cold opens. If that doesn't tell you, that they don't know what to do and they are trying to do too much, I don't know what does. There are 2 cold opens.
I don't know that a franchise has dropped off in the last 5 years quite as hard as X2 to X3. It's almost like T2 to T3 drop off. It's like there is not this level of what happened anymore, because I think the internet would lose its mind, because if something goes from a B+ to a B, the world loses its shit. This movie went from an A to a D-. Like, this is not a thing that occurs in pop culture anymore. It's crazy bad.
You know, I don't dislike Kelsey Grammer as Beast. That's fine. I don't dislike the way he looks. It's fine. What's his face? Your boy Ben as Warren.
I wish Ben Foster got more to do.
That is a great casting that we didn't really care about or get to explore. The Dark Phoenix of it all is absolutely useless and just totally ancillary. Everything you need to know about the lack of care put into X3 is all of Magneto's convictions up until this point come from his past, his persecution as a Jewish man, what he watched happen with his parents, all that stuff, right? He sees mutant life at this point as precious. It is time for mutants to evolve and become the dominant. There is no world where he would allow that much mutant blood to be spilled.
Right. It's not the character at all.
Especially callously. It's one thing if it's just, if he says like, you know, listen, if it was up to me, not a single person would die, but like there will be casualties. Unfortunately, this is a war that we are now in. He makes fun of the mutants who are the front line to Juggernaut.
Yeah, that's never Magneto. And by the way, circumstance.
And by the way, it's one of those things where there's so many of these action movies. Whenever you have a superhero, they always struggle, and this has been a problem forever. We always talk about this as comic nerds of like, well, how come they don't just do this, and then writers have to find a reason why they don't do something
for that not occurring. Yeah,
this movie doesn't do it. Like Magneto ends the battle just by like taking all of the rebar out of Alcatraz. And just like killing everybody, like just collapse. That's how you could have started the battle, and then it wouldn't have been a battle.
100%.
And all those mutants would have lost.
Watching it, you feel that you're like, well, all right.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just so sloppy.
It's not good.
It's just honestly, this actually dropped for me from what it was. It's now a 2-star movie on my like scale of like, it's not unwatchable. It's just like, oh boy, that's what they said. That's what they're doing, somehow the action got worse from the second one to this one. Like the wire work looks atrocious. Yeah. Beast.
Well, it's Mick G, dude. It's like Bryan Singer, maybe a piece of crap, but he could direct action.
Mick G. I forgot.
Like Mick G, however.
Mick G.
Yeah, like you got a guy named 3 letters. I mean, I don't think that. Anyway, I'm kind of going to be doing the opposite. Now that we've conquered the trilogy, I'll say it. I have not rewatched these. This is all off memory from. I rewatched them all leading up to New Mutants, so 5 years ago.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
I like New Mutants, Jake. I like New Mutants. But I rewatched them all then. That said, my girlfriend hasn't seen a single X-Men movie. So
that's fun.
She and I are going to go see Deadpool and Wolverine, and she's going to have no context. And I'm really curious how it is, and I don't have a lot of the what do you call it? Sample sizes that big in that. Like, I'm really curious how she enjoys something that all of my friends have so much access to Deadpool and to X-Men. So we're actually going to watch them after. So I'm going to do Deadpool and Wolverine, watch them all in August, and then hopefully have seen them all by the time the Blu-ray comes out and have that journey, which I'm excited about.
That's fun. But yeah, I don't know. As far as the original trilogy of X-Men movies, it's more bad than good. Yet somehow I don't know, I still have an affinity for it. Like it's incredible. I think that's what makes these so unique as movies, because like I don't have an affinity for fucking the Fantastic Four, the first one.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Like it's just like
you have less of an affinity for the Spider-Man movies than most.
Oh, well, that's because they're just bad as an adult rewatch. Like they're just.
But I'm saying you're not one for novelty.
But you know what? Though,
changing your.
I will say though, no, I do have an affinity. I can at least recall the way that they made me feel when I saw them in the theater. Like I can at least.
You can separate that. So I'm giving credit for your objectivity towards these films.
Yeah, no. I mean, like
I was trying to say a nice thing.
They're like not good movies that I really like to watch. Like I know it's like I don't know,
and that's okay.
Right. Well, then we moved on to First Class when Fox went, all right, new people.
That didn't work out. Let's go to a comic fan.
All right, so First Class. the beginning of the movie is so incredibly, like, they grip it's brilliant. It's like, hey guys, we know X3 was bad. Remember the stuff you liked about the remember the stuff? Remember how tragic? And then they go back to that scene. They reshoot icon, like, that was fantastic.
Genius.
So you recall, right, how they started with
It's one of
the
my favorite
opening-
things is because that was supposed to be its own movie. It was supposed to be X-Men Origins Magneto.
Right.
But then X-Men Origins Wolverine did so bad that they turned this movie into 2 movies.
Oh, right. I
Days
skipped
of-
over. So that was the movie. So this is when Origins came out? Before First Class?
X-Men Origins Wolverine came out before First Class.
So I skipped that. I didn't rewatch it.
Because they messed up twice.
I didn't watch it. It's bad.
They messed up. They did X3, and their follow-up was goddamn Wolverine,
Right.
X-Men Origins Wolverine.
So
So that's when they brought in fresh blood, because they were like, oh no, we keep messing up. Two pit, like, at that point, they were 50-50, because X1 and X2, you can argue, are good. You cannot argue X3 or X-Men Wolverines are good. So now they're batting 500,
All right.
and then they bring in First Class.
Well, in that case, before we get into First Class, really quickly, X-Men Wolverine, Origin, whatever it is, X-Men Origins Wolverine.
Yeah.
What did it give us that was bad? Everything. Liev Schreiber as Sabretooth, bad. I love him, bad. Not good casting. Wire work looks terrible. I remember the action with that movie being atrocious.
Some of the worst CGI of that era.
What did it give us that was good?
Deadpool.
Ryan Reynolds as Deadpool in a way that was bad, that created a hunger and a fire. Because if he was never in that movie, in a bad adaptation of that character, we may have never gotten the glory that was Deadpool later.
Do you want to know some origin?
Sure, give me some X-Men Wolverine origin.
So Blade Trinity is where Ryan Reynolds discovered Deadpool
Hannibal!
because he was playing Hannibal King.
God, I
and
fucking love that character.
Dude, a Marvel executive on set said, you know, you're playing this guy just like Deadpool. And Ryan Reynolds was like, what's a Deadpool? And then the next day, that Marvel exec brought him a stack of Deadpool comics, and he's like, well, you already played him like this anyway. Gives him those comics. That's how the Hello Kitty jokes made their way into Blade Trinity,
Right.
because Hello Kitty's a Deadpool thing.
I think I remember
But
that.
Ryan Reynolds then, on that set, as soon as they canceled the Hannibal King movie, that was supposed to be a Night Stalker
Or the Night
movie with
Stalkers
Jessica
movie.
Biel
Yep.
and Ryan Reynolds.
Yeah, I remember that.
And as soon as that
With
got
the fucking
canceled, Ryan Reynolds...
werewolf scene that they cut from the movie. That
Dude,
werewolf
that would've
scene
been
is
awesome.
so cool. That's on the
and it's such a
Blu-ray.
cool concept for
Yeah.
the two of them. But as soon as that got cut, Ryan Reynolds was like, I want to play this Deadpool guy. That's what I was wanting anyway. Like, this is perfect. So for like 3 years, Ryan Reynolds is actually attached to Deadpool. They say, screw you if you don't come play Deadpool for us in X-Men Origins Wolverine. We're going to cast someone else and give them a 5-picture deal. So Ryan realizes, even though it's the opposite of the character and the character sucks, that it's not going to be him if he doesn't play him this way. The writer's strike happens, the 2008 writer's strike. So now they've got Ryan Reynolds on set, who is not yet WGA, ad-libbing all of his lines, making the only good parts of the movie because he's just making shit up
Right.
on set. And then by the time the strike ends, he's already contractually obligated to another film. So there is not a single frame of the film that is Ryan Reynolds with his mouth sewn shut. He was filming The Proposal. That is all Scott Adkins. So literally Ryan Reynolds, because of the writer's strike, was able to do the good stuff and is Wade Wilson, but there is not a single frame where he is Weapon 11 and avoided all of that. Then it tanked. It then took him another 6 years to get the solo Deadpool movie made because of the leak. But in those 6 years, he found Tim Miller, he found Rhett Reese and Paul Wernick. But without that exact series of events, it would never have occurred. And then the next writer's strike doesn't happen until Deadpool 3. Like, the fucking, if I was one of those conspiracy theory astrology people, it's fucking insane how shit lined up for these movies.
Yeah, that is a real butterfly effect, sort of like if this one thing never happened, if that one guy never said, hey, you kind of playing this like
Here are
another
these guys.
like it's insane. But then also,
And if he hadn't met Hugh Jackman there,
everything else along
then
the
we
way.
wouldn't have him back here. And if Hugh Jackman hadn't done Real Steel, which was the movie he did after X-Men Origins Wolverine failed, the next movie
Right.
after the Ryan Reynolds movie was him meeting Sean Levy. If Sean Levy and him hadn't had a good relationship and Ryan and him had a good relationship, they wouldn't come back together for this movie.
It's a perfect
It is all
storm.
one giant fucking crazy.
That's crazy.
And that wouldn't have worked out if there wasn't a multiversal saga at the Marvel universe that Kevin Feige,
Right.
who wanted a multiversal saga out of the X-Men movies, went and left after Matthew Vaughn started on that journey to form his own studio. X-Men started literally in 2001. By the time you got to Matthew Vaughn,
2000.
the MCU had already started. Kevin had left the Donner Company. So it was Kevin on one side, Sean Levy, Hugh Jackman, Ryan Reynolds, if all those things hadn't landed at the exact right time, the movie we're about to get next week or 2 weeks from now couldn't exist.
Right.
Crazy.
That is pretty insane. And if that's not a testament to how hard it is to just get something that's
anything made
that you would assume would be automatically successful made, like that's a testament to how fucking difficult it all is. All right. Anyways, so X-Men Wolverine Origins happens, and then we go to First Class. Yeah. So here's my thing with First Class is that it kind of reminds me of the first X-Men movie. It's obviously a lot more slick because we're in a different era of filmmaking, right? As far as like,
and I would argue Matthew Vaughn's a better director than Bryan Singer.
100%. Right. But it still does that thing of like, here's really beautiful, poignant, interesting, philosophical on it, and then here's cheap, lazy kids movie, right? Like it constantly is flipping back and forth between those two. I left a note for myself because it bothered me so much. I was like, the movie starts so perfectly. They hook us the same way the first movie does, and then they immediately sympathize us to Eric. Then they immediately introduce us to our big bad, incredibly, and then we have to just have the laziest writing in which Eric kills the two guards, very conveniently destroys an entire room after his mother is killed, and somehow attempts no harm at the man who killed her. And yes, it wouldn't have mattered anyway because we learn later, but like he doesn't attempt it.
At the time, yeah.
And it's just, that's an example of like, well, why doesn't he do that? Well, save it. And this is like, this movie feels to me like this has that like, I could see somebody on set saying like, well, why doesn't blah, blah, blah. And someone going, it doesn't matter. It's a movie. And that
definitely like the studio note being,
yes,
it's fine.
That hates me so much. And yeah, I don't know. Also, like we time jump from the moment when he's a kid and he doesn't do any harm to Kevin Bacon's character. We time jump immediately to him being a bounty hunter, specifically trying to kill that man.
Right. It's like, well, then what, did you change your mind? Yeah, no,
yeah.
I that does still bother me, but enough works for me. It's still my favorite.
I know,
think
but
like stylistically, it's the most X-Men to me.
Well, it's bright, it's colorful, but then my argument about the stylistically is like, for a movie called First Class, we sure don't fucking spend any time with the first class
in school.
It really is like, and hearing that this was maybe
two movies,
like that kind of makes sense because the best stuff in this is the Professor X and Eric stuff, and everything else is kind of bad. And
it was supposed to be an X-Men Origins Magneto movie introducing Xavier and having him almost as the antagonist,
right? Yeah,
and then also First Class was supposed to be next,
which is there,
and then
like. But it's bad.
And I love their relationship so much.
I don't know. I don't care or like any of the younger class.
Oh, see, that's where and that could be the age thing. Like I saw it at the right age to be like, yeah, I'm going to be an X-Men.
But they're not well written or well utilized. And the except for Mystique, she's the only one that's well written. And while I love Jennifer Lawrence, I don't like her in this movie at all. And like it's just simply a like, yeah, it felt tonally weird. I fucking love her. She's great. But yeah, I don't know. I really thought that watching it again after all this time, I might soften to it and find the good, but the bad is just sort of really, really bad to hold it down. And my recollection of it, which I know I've said on the show before, I still feel that so many of the scenes end so that they could be put in a trailer. So many of the scenes end with that lost going to commercial sound, that and then a zoom in on somebody saying like, there's a war coming. Are you on the right side? Or what are we going to do next? Or I think I know just the guy. Like it does that so many times.
And to me, that always felt like the end of a comic issue. So I was like, yeah, but it's not like I see how.
But it's not an issue.
I see how you perceived it, and you're not wrong. But I was always like, they did a comic thing.
But with that said, the casting is great of the younger. Like, it's just they're not. You know, like what's his face as Beast is the best. That I think.
Oh man, they're so good.
Out of all of the things that this gave us, much like the first one, gave us Wolverine, Xavier, and Eric. This one gave us Beast, Xavier, and Eric.
Xavier and Eric.
Yeah, because they're so good at it. And then does Days of Future Past come right after this? Because they go, oh, we're going to retcon and bring back the old people.
Yeah, because it was supposed to be Days of Future, but it did well. So they were like, oh, let's combine the worlds before Marvel does it.
Right. Days of Future Past, best of the bunch of this era. It is an astonishing feat considering all of the installments that they had to pull from to make this work. Mm-hmm. It's kind of insane. I will say I like the Nixon time travel era better than our fictional dark world that that we've seen in the comics and stuff like that. Like I just like design wise, it just kind of looked kind of lazy. It was like, what does it look like? I don't know. It's dark and there's a
dark
rubble.
Shades of purple.
Yeah, it didn't really have much of a character there, but fuck, that opening is so good. It's brutal. It's so violent.
Yeah, it's my favorite performance of Hugh Jackman next to Logan. Like
I agree.
Until Logan, this was my favorite. This was Wolverine to me.
He also got to play two Wolverines.
Yeah, and he killed both. Like he was so good as both.
Even though I hate Bone Claws, don't like him.
Oh, to this day,
don't like him.
The dumbest design choice.
All right, let's talk about. Listen, we didn't get through them all, but maybe we end it here just because we know what comes after, and it's no point. Because
it's a good spot.
Everything
to enjoy.
After. Although I did watch the Wolverine, by the way, and
which is 2/3 great.
Really fucking good. Still has some.
Yeah, once Silver Samurai's in, I'm out. But up until then, I'm in.
Hard same. Okay, but all right. This is the reason why Bone Claws don't make sense. Also, the reason why the regular claws don't make sense, but why Bone Claws make less sense. Okay. All right, wait, hang on. I need a utensil of some sort to aid in this visual. Okay.
This visual for the podcast.
Yeah, for you. I got a scissor. I have a scissor. I was hoping for like a ruler because I feel like that's the best width, but we're going to go scissor. All right. So this scissor, all right, ladies and gentlemen, take a ruler or a pencil or a scissor, okay? And that is your Wolverine claw, okay? Make a fist, okay, like Wolverine does, okay?
Yeah.
Put the scissor or the claw inside your forearm, okay? Look at the length of that, all right? When the claw comes out, what is the base of it connected to that is strong enough
that locks it,
that is strong enough to where you can swipe inwards the way you would throw a hook if you were a boxer and have the bone claw, whatever, not just snap back and off immediately.
And that's why you need them to be added to your physiology.
Yes.
And they would build an anchor into your, it's got to be sheathed.
It would build some sort of tendon up by your tricep, right?
Well, then you got the elbow problem. It needs a sheath.
Yes. 100%.
And also, he can't bend his wrists when they're extended, and so many people draw it wrong. Also, the length, and I get comics can be exaggerated, but
the length is too long.
My dad's an artist.
It goes from his elbow.
Yeah, whenever my dad would draw Wolverine, he'd always show me, he did this thing where it's like, this is how long you have.
Yes.
And he'd always like add an anchor point.
100%.
And like, growing up, I was 5 when my dad started being like, now this is why Wolverine's silly. And like, it's formative to me. But Bone Claws came out while I was already reading, and I was like, that's just dumb.
It's from a physics standpoint. Also, he does the same things with them. Yeah, they don't slice. They don't slice, but he still is. Imagine punching people with an exposed bone.
Also, there's no reason, just from a nature standpoint, and I know people always bring up the frog, but he's a healing mutant. Why would the reason it's badass and messed up is because they made him go.
What about
there's a frog that has bone claws that protrude from its body when defensive.
I don't. That's the first time I've ever heard of that.
I'm giving you lots of weird facts I know today. But the healing, I always like the idea just from a philosophical standpoint of Wolverine being an angry person who healed and that being him trying to grow.
Yes.
And then someone weaponizing that.
Yes.
Literally turning something that heals into a weapon was so much more interesting to me than a little angry dude with bone claws that then they found and were like, why add metal to that when you can make him a weapon?
Yes.
Like, it lessens the character to a crazy extent.
Also, those are clearly a weapon, right? Like they're if there's no sort of like biology. I get what you're saying. There's a frog out there that has them, but the reality is like there's no use for those.
And the frog is like, as I'm getting eaten, I go, like, that's very different than like, I'm gonna fight you.
Yeah, exactly. For that purpose, like, it's like a sword. It's like, oh, I was born with swords for arms. I'm like, well, right. There are no swords in biology.
If you weaponize something, though, it's like that. Anyways,
bone claws. I will say, like that, I don't remember the bone claws from first class. Like, I don't know. Like, it's just one of those things. I'm sorry, not first class. Days of Future Past. Yeah, and then the first time he puts them out and they're bone, I'm like, oh, that's right. Fuck, I forgot about that.
They had to do that, didn't they? God damn.
And like having Eric say like, oh, imagine they would cover with metal. I'm like, oh.
It's a very X-Men 1 line. We're like, yeah, we get it. Cheeky.
Yeah. So like, I think those are the only things that maybe hold it back. Because there are some things in Days of Future Past.
Oh, I think and especially the road cut
from being as good too.
Is...
I haven't seen the road cut yet. I own it. I still haven't watched it yet.
I would argue that if they didn't have Kitty Pryde have powers that she doesn't have for no reason, and they didn't mess around with some of the fundamentals of Days of Future Past and like the heroine storyline with Xavier, if you get rid of certain elements, it would be as good as Infinity War. Like, it's so close, but those flaws drop it down for me a decent amount.
It's also just like there's some fun metaphysical stuff in there that is like getting to speak to your younger self. I remember that moment where Xavier's talk.
Beautiful.
And I remember Alexandria saying like, gosh, like, could you imagine? Like, and there's just some really, really, really beautiful filmmaking in there. It's just unfortunate that some of it's just, I don't know.
Stuff that doesn't work really doesn't work.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why it's not that's why it's not as good as X2 for me. Because X2 is like, when it comes to the execution of their desired output, like, it's kind of flawless in that regard. And
I'm really excited to rewatch these now that we're talking.
Yeah,
about
and there's some great stuff in Days of Future Past. I like that they expanded and gave us some characters without needing to overdo it with some of them. Obviously, like,
I agree.
I love Bishop so much that I kind of want. I'm like, again, I want help.
I'm excited for the MCU Bishop.
Tell me a little more.
I know they'll give it his juice, but
Sure.
it was just cool to see a Bishop.
Yeah, and I will also. Oh, this is the other big thing about Days of Future Past that fucking kills me. You go back to the 70s, okay, and we see Trask. Is it Trask? Trask who builds the. I always forget. I always forget if it's Trask or Trisk. Okay, we see him building the Sentinels. In 1970s, technology did not look like slick, silver, rounded. Like, if they were building
so bulky.
If they were building Sentinels in the 1970s, they would look like the Sentinels of the comics, which were created around the 1970s, because that's what robots looked like of the era.
It was a good opportunity to be comic accurate.
Exactly. You nailed it. Like this, you have a one perfect, because they're holding block phones and they're at these computers and they're like this dated chunky technology. And then the Sentinels look like something that was designed. I'm talking specifically about like, if you were to put yourself back in time and you were to be designing this machine, you would have no context. There would be no style inspiration for what those Sentinels looked like.
Yeah, MacBooks hadn't come out yet, guys.
Yeah, everything. And honestly, they all look like 1999 Saturns. Remember, like
it's very much like dated-ish, but not dated enough. And they're like you said, there's no context.
No, not at all. Like they would look. The irony is, they would look like purple fucking squares, and it's just like
they would look like the
Sentinels.
Yeah, it's such a shame.
It would
have been so cool.
And it was just like they don't. Yeah, they looked like War Machine. They looked like everything from Tony Stark's. Like they don't. Like they just. Oh man, I was so upset by that in this rewatch, and it's not something I think like clicked with me last time I saw it, which was a while ago.
I remember being bummed about the Sentinels, but not to scale. I think it would bother me more now. I was just excited to see Sentinels.
Sure,
that's another thing I really think the MCU is going to do well if they do it right. Is like iconography is so good.
Also, let's not forget we had a comic accurate Sentinel in the Danger Room.
Yeah, the head that dropped,
which
means there's a canon for it.
Or is that what? Like, did Xavier design
Danger Room
did Xavier design that as like, we almost had Sentinels once, or I don't know, because I can't follow the timeline.
Right. We fixed this problem.
He didn't know at that point. Oh no, because that's the timeline. That's Patrick's. Oh wait, I don't know. Now I'm trying to think whether or not that was the timeline where he had Sentinels or not. I don't know. I don't know how anything happens, but I guess not. I guess Sentinels technically never existed in that timeline because
they prevented them by way of.
Anyways, yeah, man. Listen, the Fox universe has had so many ups and downs. It's kind of crazy how many ups and downs there are. If this is indeed the end of it, I bid it farewell. I'm happy to see it go away. I don't want Hugh Jackman in Wolverine anymore or in Secret Wars.
I'm glad he gets a farewell. Like Logan's a perfect farewell, but I'm glad he gets a comic farewell.
It's like you mentioned once. This is like just a fun little dessert.
Yeah, thank you for the aperitif. Like this is going to be a good time, and what a good I'm glad that Hugh Jackman gets to revel in the age of comic content as someone who started it. And that's one of the reasons I'm so bummed I don't get to do any press with him is this is a victory lap for him, even bigger than most. And I'm so happy for him.
Right. But
yeah, that is going to do it for our Fox Universe conversation. I do believe we've got some hotline calls.
Actually, Coy,
yes.
What do you think about stopping the recording, restarting, taking some hotline calls, and then making that the episode for the week that we won't have? It won't be a very long one, but that way there's just a little.
No, that's a great idea. They have something on air. Let's do that.
Okay, so I'm not going to edit any of this out, listeners.
Okay.
We have some hotline calls. But we chatted for a while, as I thought we might. This could have been like a 4-part thing. But
easy.
I am traveling next week at time of recording. And I honestly have no idea what my setup and location is really truly going to look like when I get where I'm going. So there is kind of a big question mark right now as far as when Coy and I's next recording day is. We have something in the books, but whether or not it's going to be able to happen the way we plan, we don't know. So this is me asking for your patience over the next few weeks. We will do the best we can to ensure there's something in the Patreon only pod. We might miss a week or two there, though. We're going to do everything we can. Just please be patient. What we will do now is we'll wrap this up, and then we'll go ahead and do those hotline calls as a little mini episode, and we'll just schedule that maybe for next week or maybe we'll do it for next week. That way there's just 2 back-to-back, and I don't know, we'll sort it out. But
and then the gap, we'll figure it out.
In any case, that'll do it then for this week's program, Coy Jandro. We want to urge all of the listeners out there, if you haven't checked out the Patreon, there are how many episodes now? We're going up. We're getting up there. We're close. We're
approaching an anniversary, I believe.
Yeah, we're at like 198 right now. So not an anniversary, a milestone.
In comics, you know.
Right, that's
they always call it anniversary. I'm always like, you know what that word means,
That's
right?
not how that works. Yeah.
It's not its birthday at all. But yeah, we're approaching 200. That actually might be a good time for us to have a tiny little baby gap. We'll come back strong. But yeah, we with Jake's travel, we will see how that goes. That is going to do it for this week, though. We will be back with some hotline calls. So bear with us as things juggle. And I just want to say, check out koicast.com for all sorts of merch to keep you warm while you wait for us to come back. We got hoodies now that are dope as hell. We got t-shirts while it's hot. We got hats. We got mugs. We got everything you need over there.
Also, go ahead. I was going to just jump in here really quickly to remind folks, it's been a while since we've asked for some ratings and reviews over on the old Apple Podcast, but also Spotify does ratings now. They don't do reviews, but please head on over to Spotify, dump a rating our way. Also, you can leave comments on individual episodes at Spotify. If you do that, I will try to recall when you do and make a note, and we can chat back here on the actual pod. But also, the best way to communicate with us in real time, of course, is by heading on over to the Discord, which you can find the link to at koicast.com.
And whilst perusing them internets, I do want to give some love to the Patreon because we do a weekly show over there. So if you like this show, that is how we can continue to do this one, is with our dear patrons, where we do all sorts of movie reviews, TV reviews. If you like hearing our thoughts on things like you did today's episode, if you liked specifically like, oh, let's talk about this movie and this movie, we do that literally every week with all sorts of movies. So specifically this episode felt like a Patreon episode, and Jake wants to say something else. Yes.
Well, because I want to make good on what I just said. Here are a couple things from Spotify real quick. This was from the Declan Shalvey interview. Ricky wrote, love this interview with Declan Shalvey and the rap beef discussion. CJM responded just to an episode and just said, like, thanks for everything you guys do. Great conversation as always. And on the love and family and feelings and stuff, I definitely want to read this one. Eric Walter says, another awesome podcast. Coy, congrats on your engagement. 8 years ago, I popped the question to my wife under a palm tree right there at Venice Beach as well. That's a great place. So thanks, Eric, Walter, CJM, Ricky, for those comments. Once again, I'll try to remember to snag or to pop on over to Spotify here at the end of our episodes and respond to these in the future.
Yes, love those. Those are very kind. I appreciate you guys. But yeah, that is going to do it for this week's episode. We'll be back very soon. I appreciate everybody's patience as we juggle stuff. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And thank you, as always, to Comic Books for existing. We'll see you soon.
If you're enjoying this podcast or any podcasts on the Dragon Wagon Radio Network, be sure to check out the Dragon Wagon shop. You can tout your podcast pride while supporting your favorite indie podcast network. Make sure to check it often for new items and limited time designs. So shop now at dragonwagonshop.com. Get your dragon swag on.
It's Dragon Wagon.